Hello, my friends. Welcome to Lindy's Magpie Reads. It's another Friday Reads edition. I have 9 books to tell you about since last week. 5 of them are audiobooks. I had a lot of listening time because I traveled to Vancouver from Victoria on the weekend. I saw a play, I saw an opera, I saw some great exhibits at the Vancouver Art Gallery. So I'll tell you a little bit about those as well as the books. So let's just get right into it. One of the performances was a play called Women of the Fur Trade. It was written by Frances Koncan, who is a Anishnaabe and a Slovene mixed ancestry person. They use both pronouns, come from Couchiching First Nation. And I read this play in 2023, and I did even a little puppet show when I talked about it on my channel back in October of that year. So I will link that video down below if you want to see more about it. It's about Louis Riel and the Red River Rebellion, but it's told from the viewpoint of 3 women who are sitting trapped in a fort. And it's in the 1800s, but they're using 21st century slang as they're talking. It's basically historical satire. When this play was performed at Stratford a couple of years ago, Yvette Nolan was the director, and she said about it, "A spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down." Yeah, a very fun way to look at Canada's history. I will link a video down below of Yvette Nolan taking us behind the scenes at Stratford Theatre for this play. It'll give you a good idea about what it's like. And maybe you can watch for it coming to a theater near you. Now, I also saw an opera, a new opera. Well, it was premiered in 1998, so relatively new. It's called Flight, and it's written by Jonathan Dove with a libretto by April De Angelis. It was directed by Morris Panych. So in this opera, we meet a diverse group of people who are stranded in an airport overnight because of a storm. And one of these people is a refugee who has been living in the airport for weeks because he's paperless. So the story was actually inspired by a real life person, Mehran Karimi Nasseri, who lived in Charles de Gaulle Airport for 18 years. He was paperless, so he was unable to enter France and also unable to return back to Iran. And there was also a movie made about these circumstances that was called Terminal. It came out in 2004, and I think it starred Tom Hanks. The way the story is told is funny, cheeky, but also heartbreaking. And I can link a trailer to the production that was done in Victoria in 2020. So you'll find that in the description box down below. You know, the more I think about this opera, the more I appreciate it. There's something that's very contemporary and relevant about the feelings of isolation, the sense of waiting, the sense of being in between that you get as you watch and listen to this opera. And actually, that theme of being in between accidentally comes up in many of the books that I have to tell you about today. But before I get to those, I want to tell you about two different shows that were on at the Vancouver Art Gallery. I went especially to see Shelley Niro's 500-Year Itch. So it's a retrospective of her work. Shelley Niro is Mohawk from the Six Nations, and she's a multidisciplinary artist. She uses a lot of humor in her work. She focuses on women. The Mohawk are a matriarchal society. Once again, there's a fabulous video introduction to her work, and I am going to link that down below. And I think I might include some clips of short videos that I took while I was at the art gallery. So stay tuned to the end of this video to see that. This show has finished now. That was the final weekend in Vancouver, but it's going to be opening in April in Saskatchewan at the Rime Museum. So if you live in Saskatoon or you want to go visit Sean Breeze's books and see a fabulous art show, there you go. There's an idea. And a happy surprise for me, one entire floor at the Vancouver Art Gallery was devoted to the work of Firelei Báez, who is a Dominican Haitian American artist whose colorful work just filled me with a joyous kind of excitement. She says of her work that she wants to create alternate pasts and possible futures. And she does incorporate some Afro-Caribbean folklore. She focuses on gender and culture, and she's using this lens of the diaspora. Oh, beautiful, amazing, amazing work. Okay, on to the books. Starting with Brownstone, a graphic novel by Samuel Teer and Mar Julia, with really bright, colorful art. This won the American Library Association Prince Award. That's the award for YA literature. Very deserving. So first, about the creators. Samuel Teer has a deaf maintenance worker father and a Guatemalan immigrant mother. And Mar Julia, who is a queer, trans non-binary cartoonist, has Dominican and Irish and Italian ancestry. So the main character in here, this book is set in 1995. Almudena is going to be spending the summer that she turns 15 with her father in New York City. She has never met him before. He's a Guatemalan immigrant who doesn't speak English, and Almudena, who was raised by her white mother, does not speak Spanish. However, her mom's going to Europe for the summer, and so this is where she ends up. Her father is renovating an old brownstone, and so she helps him with this construction project, and they get to know each other. And I guess she learns about a new definition of family in the process. There are two significant queer secondary characters in here, and you might already know this, but demolition is a really great outlet for your emotions. Next, I have a couple of books I picked up for Black History Month, starting with Maud Martha by Gwendolyn Brooks. So this is a classic, actually. It was first published in 1953. Let me tell you about Gwendolyn Brooks first. She was an African-American poet and civil rights activist. She was born in 1917, died in the year 2000. She won a Pulitzer Prize in 1950 for Annie Allen. She was the first Black author to do so. In 1976, she was the first Black woman to be inducted into the American Academy of Arts and Letters. And in 1985, she was the first Black woman to become Poet Laureate of the United States. Okay, so back to Maud Martha. And this is about the titular character growing up in Chicago. It's the period before the Second World War, I think. It's told in a series of vignettes. So we see her from her younger years into teenage years, into getting married, having a child. And it reminded me a lot of A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. And Maud Martha is a lot like Francie, actually, except maybe she's more clear-eyed and down-to-earth, even more than Francie is. There's even a scene in a hat shop that really is a lot like the chapter in A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. Give you a taste of the writing style. Here she's describing people who live in the apartment building. Then there was Clement Louis, a little boy at the back on the second floor. Louis' life was not terrifically tossed, saltless rather, or like an unmixed batter, lumpy. Little Clement's mother had grown listless after the desertion. She looked as though she'd been scrubbed up and down on the washing board, doused from time to time in gray and noisome water. But little Clement looked alert. He looked happy. He was always spirited. He was in second grade. He did his work and had always been promoted. At home he sang. He recited little poems. He told his mother little stories wound out of the air by himself. His mother glanced at him once in a while. She would have been proud of him if she had had the time. And one more little bit, considering the word tragedy. On the whole, she felt life was more comedy than tragedy. Nearly everything that happened had its comic element, not too well buried either. Sooner or later, one could find something to laugh at in almost every situation. That was what, in the last analysis, could keep folks from going mad. The truth was, if you got a good tragedy out of a lifetime, one good, ripping tragedy, thorough, unridiculous, bottom-scraping, not the issue of human stupidity, you were doing, she thought, very well. You're doing well. And that's Maud Martha. The reason I picked up Maud Martha is because it was on a list that I saw on parade.com of the 101 best YA books. I went through the list and I'd read over half, like some 60 some of the 101 titles. But what really struck me is so many of these are books that I would consider adult books, including Maud Martha. There was Jane Eyre, David Copperfield, Siddhartha, Lord of the Rings, Persepolis, Never Let Me Go, The Three Musketeers, Stephen King's It, Maxine Hong Kingston's Woman Warrior, Hannah Tinty's The Good Thief. There was one by David Almond, who is really known for his children and YA books, but the one that they chose for this parade list was The Tightrope Walkers, which the publisher marketed as an adult book. So I was kind of scratching my head at this list. However, I am going to link it down below because there's lots of good titles and some that I rarely see promoted that I really like, including The Shipbreakers by Paolo Bacigalupi and Darius the Great is Not Okay by Adib Khorram. So have a look if you like. And the second book that I have for Black History Month is The Rage Letters by Valérie Bah. She is a queer writer and photographer from Quebec, and it was translated from French by Kama La Mackerel, who's a Mauritian-Canadian poet and writer. I have read their book, Zomfam, a collection of poetry that I really liked. So this is actually a collection of interconnected stories that feature Black queer characters. It's mostly set in Montreal, and there are occasionally some slightly supernatural aspects. It's really engaging. It's got some wide-ranging literary references, The Life of Pi, Marguerite Duras, The Lover, little literary treats like that. In the final story, the Flanage, several of the characters from the different stories have gathered together at a rental house in Quebec's eastern townships. And I'm going to just read a teeny bit from there. Around noon, I parked the car next to the manicured flower bed of a chalet, or rather a McMansion, in front of which a woman awaits. She hands us the keys and punctuates each of her words with her acrylics, while regurgitating a bunch of rules about the rental. It is prohibited to, among other things, use the fireplace, consume recreational drugs, grill shellfish on the barbecue, run the dishwasher if it's not full, wear lotion in the hot tub, disturb the irises, use gas to light a fire, eat in the living room or the foyer, and not to mention the bedrooms, of course. When finally she decides to leave, we bid her farewell, lined up on the veranda in a ceremonious manner. As soon as her car disappears at the end of the road, we light a joint and proceed to break all of those rules as they have a fantastic weekend together. This is great. There is rage, but there's also creativity and joy. So, speaking of rental houses, this next book is in audio format, The Rental House by Weike Wang. She was born in China and grew up in the United States. And in this novel, we have a couple. Keiru is a child of Chinese immigrants, and her husband is white with parents from Virginia. And so the in-laws just can't seem to see eye to eye. This is witty family drama So we have this interracial couple and their big sheepdog, Mantu, and we see them, I think it's about 5 years apart, at one rental place and then at another rental place. His mother says things like, "A person should come from one place. I don't understand why some people need to come from more." And the central issue in the book about identity and feeling at home, I think, is summed up in this line: "A home is not a given, and for many, a hard, sometimes impossible place to find." This is such a great story, and Keru at times is fueled by such rage, and yet she's such an admirable character too. So such an interesting character. Loved her. There are lots of great characters in this next audiobook, The Smokehouse. It's by the Australian author Melissa Manning. She's also a lawyer. She grew up in Tasmania, and I think her home base now is Melbourne. It won the Victorian Premier's Literary Award in 2022, and I heard about it from Louise, one of my subscribers. It's available on the Hoopla database. It's a series of interconnected stories again. I love interconnected stories. In this case, they're all set in one area in Tasmania, and we see family dynamics. So we'll see some characters from childhood, and then later on in adulthood, we see adults with young families, and then later on, these same adults when their children have grown up. There's a gay couple during their working life, and then later when they're retired. So we're going, like, the aging process is also a subject in these stories, and I recommend them. Next, I have another graphic novel, Dog Days by Keum Suk Gendry Kim, and it was translated from Korean by Janet Hong. I've read a couple other books by this author, also translated by Janet Hong. The Waiting and Grass, both are excellent. In this one, it is autofiction. The husband in a couple has, he's been grieving that the grandmother who raised him has died. He's wanted a dog all his life. So his wife said, okay, let's get a dog. But their dog, Carrot, is quite anxious. And so they end up moving to the countryside for the dog's sake. And the wife, who's stand-in for the author, she becomes really attached to the dog. She works from home. However, this village that they are in, the people there don't have the same attitude towards dogs. And there are dogs that are being mistreated. There are people there who eat dogs. And so there's this clash of values, something to be aware of if you're really sensitive to the treatment of animals. But I want to read to you from the author's afternote. So this afterword was written in 2024. It's been 5 years since I moved to the countryside. Like most city dwellers, I never once thought about the existence of dog meat restaurants or that some people were still consuming dogs. I published Dog Days as a deliberate act of resistance. On January 9th, 2024, the National Assembly finally passed a ban on the dog meat industry. So that was a fantastic ending to this charming story about a couple who ends up with several dogs. Next, I guess this is kind of a palate cleanser, a fun historical romp called Nicked by M.T. Anderson. M.T. Anderson is known for his YA and middle grade novels. This is actually his adult debut. On that parade list of 101 best YA novels, one of M.T. Anderson's books is there. It's called The Astonishing Life of Octavian Nothing, Traitor to the Nation, which I loved. So Nicked is based on a true historical event, which was the theft of St. Nicholas's bones about 700 years after he died. So this took place in the 11th century, and that's the setting for this novel, with a couple of gay characters that are at the center of the story. Next, the audiobook Mina's Matchbox by Yoko Ogawa. This was translated from Japanese by Stephen Snyder, who has translated other works by Ogawa. I do really like her writing. This one is quite a bit quieter than her other novels that I've read. And I think it's based somewhat on her own experience. It's set in 1972, so Ogawa would have been around 10 years old at this time, and her two main characters are a pair of cousins, two girls, one's 11 and one's 12, and it's a coming-of-age story. So the kind of experiences you have when you are just entering adolescence. It's actually told in first person by a woman who's looking back to these events that happened 30 years in the past, which I think adds to its nostalgic quality. So Mina is the girl on the cover who's riding a pygmy hippopotamus that her family owns. They used to have a zoo. They're quite a rich family. Her father is half German, and her cousin comes to stay with her for a year when Tomoko's mother is gone to study dressmaking because their father has died and her mother's the breadwinner of the family. Pochka, the pygmy hippopotamus, is quite an interesting character in this book. So, last book, and this is the best of the bunch, the best of a great bunch. It's The Details by Ia Genberg, translated from Swedish by Kira Josefsson. This book won the August Prize in Sweden, and it was shortlisted for the International Booker, and it was on Bibliosophi's Best Books of 2024. The first time that I listened to this, the audiobook is only 4 hours long, I thought, wow, 4.5, 4.75 stars. And then I listened to it a second time, 5 stars. There's something really special about the way this story is told. In the translator's note at the end, she talks about how the long winding sentences with multiple clauses were an interesting challenge for the English translation, because in English, a run-on sentence is a bad thing. So when you're listening to this in audio, you don't get that sense of run-on, or at least I didn't. And I was particularly watching for it the second time around. The story is told from a woman's viewpoint, looking back on her life. So she's in a fever, and the story is in 4 parts, thinking about 4 people who were important in her life. She's bisexual. The first person is an ex-lover of hers, Johanna. Then there's Nikki, a friend and a former roommate who just left, disappeared, and she never saw again. And then there's Alejandro, another person who was really important to her for a while, and then she completely lost track of. And Birgitta. There are so many lines that struck me. Here's one. Some books stay in your bones long after their titles and details have slipped from memory. People stay with you too, long after you've lost contact. In some sense, no relationship ever ends. Books, reading, writing, these are all central to this novel. So of course that was a big hook for me. The narrator says she struggles with the stroll of the thought from the head onto the paper. Isn't that a great way of putting it? In another place, she says, all there is to the self is traces of people we rub up against. Now, all of the details of Swedish life, past and present, are also a big draw for me. There's lots about the food. In the apartment house that she lives in with Nikki, they go up to the roof where there's a balcony that was designed for beating rugs. There's a time when she's searching for someone and looking through telephone books. So again, a reminder of old school technology. Anyway, these quiet, exquisite character portraits that are amassed through details are how we get to know the character of the narrator herself, which I really liked. It actually reminded me in that way of Rachel Cusk's outline. I just loved it. So that is all I've got for you today. Thank you so very much for watching. I really appreciate hearing from you, so please do say hello in the comments down below. Let me know if you've read any of these or if you intend to pick any up. Let me know what great things you're reading these days. I always like to hear about that too. And stick around if you want to see a little bit of the art from the Shelley, Niro and the Firelei Báez shows that I saw at the Vancouver Art Gallery. Thanks again. Bye for now. Happy reading, everybody.